Now a recording is in progress. We're happy to having you. The idea is the following. We would like to share current topics with you and like to promote the idea of the TICC, of the Institute of Technology, Innovation and Customer Centricity. Very shortly, I think the majority does already know as the TICC aims to bridge the gap between engineering excellence on the one hand, something which is very, very common in a way in Germany, and on the other hand, trying to translate these great ideas into markets. That's why Tobias Gutmann and I have joined to come together to bring innovation and marketing to pool it within the TICC. Tonight, we have got a great talk about the effect of the pandemic on innovation, and I'm really happy to have Christian Lindener with us, who is heading the accelerators of now I'm having it's called the Biz Lab, yeah, the Biz Lab, and he's heading all the accelerators for Airbus and trying to pool all these ideas together. And I do think that he has to tell us a lot. He will introduce himself. He will tell us how does the pandemic affect all the innovation procedures, the way of collaborating, which is very important. I'm really looking forward to learn more about the culture, about the way, about the procedures. Christian, we're happy to having you. I do know you are joining us from Seefeld in Austria, I think, where you are at vacation at the moment with your family. Thank you for this short interruption, for coming to us, for joining us. I would like to hand over to you. The floor is yours. Welcome, Chris.
Many thanks, Sven, for this kind introduction. And of course, there was no doubt when my good friend Toby asked me if I want to do this, I definitely said yes immediately. I know the other three versions of the TICC.TALK, which is very, very exciting. Also, a couple of members of which I know. So I'm very happy to be here. And thanks for you for inviting and giving me space for this. I hope there's a little bit of entertainment for everybody here. But besides entertainment, I mean, it has been a very rough year, I believe, for us innovators. And therefore, this is where I would like to then share my screen. Madeleine, I think this could work out. Let me just quickly see how this works. There we go. And you now should be able to see my screen. Is that correct? It's quick heads up. Yeah, because I cannot see the screen, so you need to give me an audio. Perfect, fantastic. So, good. So while we were wondering what the topics could be, but before we jump into the topic, a little bit to where I come from and what justifies me speaking about this. So I actually started my semi-professional career and studying international business at Innsbruck. It's called Internationale Wirtschaftswissenschaften in Austria. And therefore I had the luck for 1 year to go abroad, and I went to Barcelona. I didn't want to go back, but it was crisis in Spain back then. So we started founding companies. So we founded the first company, which was a hardware company, which we gloriously then wound down in 2009. And with 3 of the 4 founders, we started the next company, which was augmented reality. And we sold this one successfully to Booking.com. So winding down one company and exiting another one to corporates brought me to the questions, corporates and startups, can they work together? After that, then I ramped up some incubators and accelerators. This was mainly in Switzerland at Credit Suisse and UBS banks and in Zurich. Back then, moved on to Tech Founders, which is a hardware high-tech accelerator in Munich, working together with BMW, Bosch, Siemens, Festo, Adidas, a couple of heavyweight German champions back then, where we accelerated over 56 high-tech startups after I then moved on to become the managing director of WIDA, which is the first corporate accelerator ever. They started in 2008 with the accelerator startup game and invested in far more than 1,000 startups, where we relaunched then the new model on how startups could work with corporates. It's called the venture client model. And that is where then my now boss, the CTO of Airbus brought me to Airbus to run their accelerators and incubators. And that's where I landed in 2019. That's where I stranded in 2020. As everybody might suppose and know, obviously the aerospace industry is in a lot of movement. It's hit one of the most industries by the pandemic. But at the end, it was a big opportunity, because when mass is in motion, you also have the opportunity to change a lot of things, and especially in innovation, this was the case, where you're going to learn now the story on what we did, what we saw. So the world as corporate innovator and how corporates see innovation is always that, fine, we just plug innovation inside our old structures and our incumbent procedures, and then innovation will save us, right? But it doesn't work like that, right? What we discovered already with Accelerator is that you can't just plug in innovation into the old structures, right? It doesn't work like that. You're not innovative because you work with startups. You're not innovative because you do design thinking, these startup methodologies and all that, and all that stuff. What we rarely discovered when running all these accelerators is that we were hitting against all these internal walls on processes and structure, and then said, look, we need to adapt internally. So really bringing this old incumbent structures to adaptation. Everybody, or most of the people that ran accelerators and labs and whatever in Berlin or any fancy city with fancy offices, now knows that that at the end this wasn't the way to go. Because at the end, it happens this, right? Most of them, innovation labs, accelerators, or think tanks, most of them do not survive. I remember when I started WIDA, the accelerator, most of the competitors were back then, they don't exist anymore. And this accelerated drastically and rapidly throughout the pandemic. Corporates run into cash containment. The first thing they cut out is marketing and innovation. So it led to a very natural cleaning of the innovation departments. And for us now, I must say, it's a great opportunity to do something meaningful out of it. Because as we see our industry, the aerospace industry, we probably built the most complex mobility platform ever. You see a picture here of the A380, beautiful aircraft, but definitely had a lot of design flaws and assumptions that were not validated correctly. That's why it's been put out of order at this very moment. But anyways, what we learned is that technologies, and that's why we are serving our CTO within innovation, are interfaces. That's when we talk about how does a corporate interact with the outer world, because a corporate or Airbus as such will not get where we want to go if we don't open up the company to external startups or innovations, technologies, whatsoever. If we don't do that, we know, and this is symbolic for some other corporates as well, is that you just end up like this fellow here, being demounted on the product side. If our company still builds aircraft in 10 to 15 years, definitely there was something going wrong within our innovation department. And that's what we do. We simplify the processes and create simple interfaces for startups to work with us, technologies to work with us, in universities works with us, and let all that outside inflow inside the company. So outside in and inside out is what we do when it comes to innovations. This was very, very dramatically run off to us, that if we keep on doing the same stuff with all the accelerators, the labs, and all the things that do not create any impact, it's insanity, because it's doing the same things, and now we have the unique chance in history to do something very different. Our company is full of innovators, right? We have all those fantastic engineers, all those brilliant people that think about all those fantastic technologies. What is a lack in big, heavy R&D industries is also always the business thinking. So how can we do something different out of the technologies we evolve? It's definitely not a digital company, but it's a hardware company that does a lot of complex things. So we started this journey thinking how could we quickly integrate the new business models that are scalable and have a positive impact on the world, right? So this was the heart of our journey when we started rethinking Airbus innovation. And it might seem cocky to say on the world, but every second, at least in 2019, 6 million people left on an Airbus aircraft. So this is a lot, and I do believe that this can have a positive impact. Yet you need to define the simultaneous place that you are as the open interface, and that's just to show you a little bit how complex innovation in large companies is. You have the startups you're working with, you're doing some business building, you have the corporate founders, the so-called intrapreneurs. You're also seen as a fancy model of new work evolution because we work distantly. I mean, this what we do now with the pandemic, working remotely, for us, it wasn't something new. It was something that we were doing all the way. You're a market maker, so how do you exploit new markets and new customers? And you're doing ongoing scouting on new technologies. So just to show you how complex this is, you need to adapt the mindset of seeing disruption as an opportunity. We saw disruption coming from customers, from markets, from technologies, electrification, hydrogen. These are technologies that are coming, and now really new, biology, right? And that's where our innovation units also were not prepared for when COVID hit. We couldn't shift that fast to really adapt to the new realities. So we see startups out there, we bring them into our deep systems, into this huge company, and then exploit them internally by creating business deals and what to do. It's a process behind that. You can learn that. It's the startup track, what we call it. And just to illustrate how complex also it is to bring startups into big companies, right? You need to touch a lot of procurement processes, marketing, compliance, and all that. So it's not as easy as thought. And that's when you remember what I said at the beginning, accelerators at the beginning also failed a little bit on connecting startups with the big company. And all that, you don't have to do it once, but you have to do it 100 and 1,000 times. So how many startups can you bring into this big company? Growing the core, growing new products and new services, and then also offering these to airlines, governments, and the end customers, which are Airbus customers, right? And startups is only one means to get the end, where we actually see this as industrializing how we work with innovation. Startups are a great resource of doing that. But where we really see the value is really creating our own so-called growth engines, meaning that what kind of technologies do we have in-house that we can use differently, right? I mean, in a company that is so R&D heavy, we do a lot of things around sustainability, around mobility platforms. So right now we are thinking, what kind of things have we already created where we can think it differently and build businesses around it? If you see the speed of startups left and right accelerating and overcoming our own industry, could we be able to also create corporate startups at speed and scale? That is the question we're doing. That's where we're tapping into venture building. Again, a proven concept with many other corporates. But what if we could take the technology, rethink the business model around it, hire a team of entrepreneurs, and then really bring it to market, right? We see a lot of technologies out there, and the market is demanding all these aerospace technologies. Look at Lilium, Climeworks, Archer Aviation, not only all the urban mobility startups, but many others launching things to space. So the aerospace industry is very interesting at the moment for risk capital, where interest rates are also very, 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 very small. So that is now tapping into only two examples. We still have CVC, corporate venture capital, which leaves another space for another discussion. But there's so much around innovation which you can measure. You can measure it in hard cash and how much comes back to the company. But there's also the ripple effect, like how is your company seen? Is it innovative? What does this mean for the end customer? Also the trend scouting we're conducting. That to see the future, what is coming as ahead as a disruptor. and you can also use it as a competitive advantage against other incumbents that are in the market there. But happy to discuss this all in too deep in any discussion. At the end, it's managing a portfolio. You need to create a lot of big topics that will have longer term impact, and you have a couple of short term topics that the impact is not so big. It really nurture a portfolio on getting that. And all that, obviously, times are over where innovation was a lot of post-its and design thinking and fancy offices, as I said before. At the end, you can measure everything. Just here on this slide, you see what can also be measured. We measure almost 40 KPIs on innovation, on how much time we take into market, what kind of technologies, what kind of fields. So it's all in there. At the end, you can measure innovation. Everybody who says you cannot, it's just not telling the truth. But happy to discuss this more with you guys now. Also, if you have any questions, happy to receive them in the chat. Scan this QR code, and then we're connected on LinkedIn, and feel free to just reach out to me and ask any questions you have. Many thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Of course, we have a lot of questions, and just for everyone online. So I will ask some questions, and then we announce the next speaker, and then of course we will open the round for open questions here. So Chris, thanks again for being here. You joined Airbus like shortly before the pandemic hit, and the pandemic hit Airbus, of course, very hard because, of course, traveling was restricted. You know, what happened at Airbus when the pandemic hit? Can you walk us through kind of what were the processes, the governance? I think this is really interesting for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, besides all the tragedy with the pandemic, right? I'm not going to say, when I say this is an opportunity, I'm not talking about that. And it's a killer virus. Just to be clear on that. But on Airbus, it was amazing, and this was the first time I saw it within a large company, and this is the leading aerospace company of the world we're talking about, that it can move fast, right? So all the hurdles we had with innovation, we're not fast enough, we cannot scale. They just had a plan rolled out, which was really on cash containment and social plan, where it was the first time I saw really a plan being rolled up so fast across the whole company. So the company went completely into mitigating all the risks and all the damage that can be done to get really to a leaner, more effective company. So at the end, the pandemic had to come to really sort out a lot of blockers we had at the moment. And for us, I mean, we now scaled down from 67 innovation vehicles, accelerators, incubators, you name it. I'm sure we had every corporate innovation vehicle you could have imagined. We scaled them down to 4 vehicles, right? 4 days, 4 like this. 4 vehicles, mainly focusing on the future new business and what Airbus should do. So that's why I'm saying this was a great opportunity for the company to reconfigure and give really innovation the place where it should be on the highest agenda of the company.
This is really interesting. Of course, like you mentioned, you streamline operations. You look into becoming a leaner organization. You mentioned how you also streamlined the number of innovation vehicles. But overall, like, how did the pandemic hit Airbus in your innovation initiatives? Of course, you mentioned you only have 4, but how was the budget constraints? How did you work? How did you still kind of keep the innovation engine running?
Yeah, I mean, when we ran into the exercise, I mean, obviously the budgets were cut for example, as 1/4 to what we had. We had to redeploy a lot of colleagues. A lot of colleagues left the company as well. But what was also positive on that side is that we had 367 innovation projects running in March 2020. Right, 367. Let that sink. We stopped like 267, saying like, what is the impact on this innovation project the next 18 months? If it's none, then we stop it. We stop them, and we handed over 100 projects to the internal customers, saying like, if you want this innovation project to survive, or if you think it is valuable or important, then you also go on and pay for it. So really thinking, is this necessary for the survival of the company? And if not, we stop it, like really rigorous stopping things. And big companies are also very bad on that. And if they have a value, like reshuffling the budget towards the higher impact innovation projects.
And now, we hope that the pandemic is almost like up to an end. But how is Airbus recovering, and also how is innovation at Airbus recovering?
I mean, the flights are increasing almost every day. I mean, we're monitoring that, and to understand Airbus a little bit, this is a company also dependent from 67% is commercial aviation, right? We also have defense and space. We also have helicopters, but they're very small. But if you have a company being so dependent from commercial aviation, which is also a threat, then you also see where the money comes from, right? While our customers also took the exercise on being leaner, more effective, they're also now changing all the fleets towards more efficient aircrafts, which then again brings new business to the company, and where we're now able to think about, we have such a fragile business, what is going to be our business in the future? And this is something we're drafting at the moment, which are the markets we want to go to and where we're going to enter in, where innovation obviously plays a crucial word. So we are recovering. Again, I mean, this year is going to be still critical, and let's see until we're out of the woods. We're not yet there, but it looks like the market will be back in 2024, but latest in 2024, 2025, we need to have an answer on what is going to be the business of the future. And this is something we're working now almost every day. Not this week, I'm on vacation, but any other day, working on that.
Interesting, thank you. Like from the external side, there was of course a lot of changes, but when I look at Airbus from the outside, I also saw a lot of changes internally. Like the top management constellation changed over the last couple of weeks. Kind of what happened and how have you experienced this, and also what's the impact again on innovation there? And then also maybe you can explain to the audience kind of what's happening and what are the changes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, all the management changes we had, we were, I mean, the news went out a couple of weeks ago that our CTO, my boss, will leave the company. And this is also the changes you have on the top level, that you're consolidating activities, right? You're making a leaner management structure as well. We are now merging with engineering, for example, putting engineering and future technologies together. Because you think there are a lot of overlaps there that can now be mitigated, and building leaner structures overall, and also getting to a higher efficiency. Then, I mean, also a lot of people decided to pursue their own projects, so this is also acceptable. As I said at the beginning, it's mass in motion, right? It's amazing what is happening to this big company, and it would have been possible without the pandemic, as sad as is it.
Interesting. Yeah. So my last question is, what would you do differently now if you could go back before the pandemic? What would you do differently in terms of like steering the big ship, the mothership, but also steering all the innovation activities? What would you do with the knowledge you have now? What would you do differently?
I would say one of looking back, one of the errors I did, one of the failures I did, you can say. You cannot influence the speed or the slowness of a big company. It's impossible, right? You have 134,000 employees. It's a global company. You can move as fast as you want, and changing things. You always have to create this massive stakeholder management, align everybody. When that is aligned, then you can move forward. Like small insurgent moves, like we're used to doing them as entrepreneurs. They're not effective in a large company. You need to know the people and know your ways. You need to know the game to play the game. And it's a very interesting game if you play it. And if you know it, it will kill you if you don't.